I'm going to go through verbs again here and go a little bit more into how the different types of verbs, the action verbs and the linking verbs, actually work with helping verbs. Okay? So this is verbs again. Now, really, in the end, all verbs are in the end either action verbs or linking verbs. And the important thing to keep in mind that helping verbs help out action verbs or they help out linking verbs. They are never the main verb, the main part. And if you already understand this, this is great. Many students do understand how the verb works. Many students have questions about it and aren't quite clear. So this should start to clean up some of the issues and start to clear up some of the issues. And here I have four, fairly simple sentences. And really, all verbs in the end work something like either these action verbs or these linking verbs. Really, they're a variation on these two basic patterns here. Okay? In the first one, I have James wrote 3 letters. And the full verb is wrote. That, for most people, isn't very complicated. It's pretty straightforward. James is your subject. What did he do? He wrote. One word is your full verb, and that one word, wrote, is not on the linking list, so it can't be anything else but an action verb. And if you think about it, it is something that James does. It's something James did here. So this is an action verb, and in the end, all verbs are going to either be action verbs or linking verbs. And in this case, it's an action verb. Okay? So that should be pretty straightforward. That's a very simple case. The next one, James was writing 3 letters. It means very much the same thing because it has James there, it has the letters, and it still has the activity or the action of writing. Okay? In this case, the verb is 2 words long. It was writing. Okay? And this is very important to understand. James is still doing writing. In this case, he had done it in the past. In this case, it was ongoing in the past. James is your subject. Your full verb is was writing. In this case, was is your helping verb. Writing is your main verb. And in this case, you have no helping verb. You only have a main verb. The important thing to understand is even with the helping verb, it's still an action verb. Why? Because the main verb is an action verb. That's why. So you can stack helping verbs in front of the main verb, and the verb remains either an action or a linking verb. In this case, this one's an action. This determines it. This was is a helping verb, helping out an action verb. The full verb is was writing. Okay? It can get longer. You can actually add 3 helping verbs in front of 1 action verbs. You could have James had been writing, that's 2 of them, or the letters had would have been written, that's 3 helping verbs in front of 1 action verb. You can add helping verbs 1, 2, or 3 deep in front of 1 action verb. But you have to keep in mind the verb is still an action verb. It remains that way. In spite of the helping verbs, it still remains an action verbs. They don't change the basic nature of it. They change how it functions a little bit from active to passive. It turns into a past tense or future tense or other things. But still it's an action verb based on that last verb in the line. Okay? Now the next type of verb that I gave you was linking verbs, and all verbs are ultimately either action verbs or linking verbs. All verbs are ultimately either action verbs or linking verbs. And this one is an example here. Dawn felt terrible. Felt is the full verb. It's 1 word long, and it's the main verb. It has to be the main verb if you only have 1. And it's a linking verb. Now, keep in mind with linking verbs, there is no action. Nobody has done anything. Keep in mind, Don didn't feel the terrible. He didn't touch anything. In this case, this is describing how he is. It's a, what they call state of being. And what you get instead is a very different type of logic. you get this logic of A equals B. The terrible is describing Dawn. That's what it does. The terrible is describing the subject. The felt, the verb, is not something Dawn does. It instead is the link between the subject and the description. The verb is not an action, but a link between the subject and its description. That's what it is. Okay, so it works with a very, very different type of logic. And felt is on the linking list. Keep in mind that the list is somewhat limited. As I mentioned before, it's about 10 to 16 words, can only be linking verbs. Some of these, which I'll go into later on, can be either action or linking. This one could be an action verb. In this case, it's a linking verb. But you have to be on that list to be a linking verb. And when you are, and when it's functioning as a linking verb, you don't have an action. You have a link between them. Okay? But notice the same logic. It's one word long, and so it remains a linking verb. And that's the last word in the verb. That's the main verb. And it's a linking verb, and so it functions that way. In this one, Dawn was feeling terrible. We have the same type of thing. We have a helping verb, and it's helping out the main verb. In this case, it happens to be a linking verb. It's the same basic meaning. Dawn was feeling terrible. Now it's kind of in the past, and it's a continuous verb, but the same logic works. A equals B. I am still describing how Dawn was feeling. He's not doing anything. Dawn was feeling terrible. Okay, he didn't do anything. It's just describing his state of being, the way he was. A equals B. The terrible is still describing Dawn. That's what it's doing. In this case, like we saw here above, the helping verb comes in front of the main verb, which is feeling, and feeling in this case is a linking verb, so this remains a linking verb. It's a linking verb with a helping verb helping out. That's the logic of it. That logic is behind basically all verbs. If you can understand that logic, you can really understand almost all verbs in almost all cases. Verbs always boil down to being either actions or being linkings between subjects and descriptions. They can have helping verbs helping them out. They can have those helping verbs helping them out, but they always boil down to either actions or links between subjects and descriptions. That's how they work. Okay? Take care.